It's a day that we open a center that will be here into the future to study the life of a restless creator who, if you think in the history of American music, if there's any songwriter who could be self-satisfied and resting on his laurels, it would have to be Bob Dylan. And yet the story of his career is that he never has been. He's always been focused on evolving, on finding new horizons, on growing. And I think for any of us, that is an ideal as people or as a community. I have the great honor on behalf of 400,000 of my neighbors to convey our deep gratitude to the team at the George Kaiser Family Foundation for making this happen. They have created yet another beacon for our community. They've done this, and as Ken said, evolving from the Woody Guthrie Center, combining it with the church studio, Kane's Ballroom, the future Oklahoma Museum of Popular Culture just a couple blocks away. With all of these opening and underway, Tulsa is becoming a center for the study of American music. It is also a focal point not just for America, but for the world. The Dylan Center already, today, before the doors have even opened, has members from 40 states and 13 countries. That includes the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Austria, Sweden, Japan, Libya, the Republic of Singapore, and Israel. In fact, as Ken mentioned, at the VIP preview over the last week, it drew visitors from all over the world, including London, Milan, Paris, and Sao Paulo. Coverage has already appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, the Houston Chronicle, and there's going to be so much more over the next several days. So again, we are deeply grateful to Ken and his team at the George Kaiser Family Foundation for their vision and following through on it. I also want to thank Crystal Reyes. Crystal came to Tulsa from New York as a Dylan scholar. That's what brought her here to our community. Yet today, she works as the Chief Resilience Officer for the city of Tulsa. As we work to become the most welcoming city in America for our immigrant community, as we work to close a century plus of racial disparities in our community, Crystal is the person leading that work for the city of Tulsa.
Yeah.
I think her story is such an important reminder that the impact that this center is going to have on our community is about so much more than tourism. It's a beacon. And so today, beginning today, we invite all of Tulsa and all of the world to be inspired by that beacon, to be exhilarated by it, and enlightened by this one-of-a-kind American songwriter. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mayor Bynum. That was lovely. And the mention of Crystal, who really wanted to be here with us this morning, is feeling a little bit under the weather and thought it would be best to stay home and rest, but I know she's with us here in spirit and support, and we will see her at the center very soon. A big part of the Bob Dylan Center has to do with presenting a plurality of voices. You know, we don't want this to be something where those of us who are fortunate enough to call this our professional home and have jobs here at the center and with the American Song Archives. We want to present our perspectives, but we really are dedicated to bringing in a lot of other folks who can share their thoughts, not only on Dylan, but where we are socially and culturally, what's happening in the world and how we can reflect current events at the center tied into Dylan's long history. We have an artist in residence program through which we will be working with folks from all different disciplines, all different communities. We are extraordinarily honored to kick off the artist in residence program with Tulsa's very own Joy Harjo. How many three-time U.S. Poet Laureates do we have in the audience today? Exactly. This doesn't happen very often, but the fact that Joy just wrapped up her third term as U.S. Poet Laureate suggests not only her extraordinary gifts as a poet, as a writer, as a musician — she plays a mean saxophone if you haven't heard her — but just her stature within American culture, within the Native American community. And it'll be just such a pleasure to see what Joy brings and the joy she brings to the Bob Dylan Center in these coming years. Please join me in welcoming the one and only Joy Harjo.
Harjo, Stongo. It's good to see everyone out here to celebrate vision and music and life. That's what we're all here to do, is to serve. We're all in service positions to take care of the gifts that we were given. And part of taking care of those gifts, and everyone here brought gifts with them, is to share them. So I see this center as a kind of sharing place. As the speakers before, it's to share Tulsa and the Muskogee Creek Nation nationally, internationally, and here locally. So I'm going to, I started writing this piece called Tangled, about one of my favorite Bob Dylan songs, and Tangled. Every age has its prophets and troubadours, the singers of trouble, love, and the tangled story we humans make as we journey from birth to death, from the earth to the stars and back. Dylan began in the footsteps of Woody Guthrie, then veered to stand and sing his original take on the story of our generation. By 1975, the year the album Blood on the Tracks was released, and the tune Tangled Up in Blue caught the ears of so many, there was more than enough trouble with conflict in Vietnam, the Khmer Rouge massacres, apartheid in South Africa, and the aftermath of Wounded Knee, when 2 FBI agents went down. Anime Piktuakwash, the American Indian Movement warrior, was found dead, shot in the head in a ditch, gone for months. The lyrical, ballad-like poem song of Tangled Up in Blue is a kind of chorus of different lives, each crafted around a transformative moment revealed in the ordinary details out of which our living unwinds. Each story is gathered with the hook phrase, tangled up in blue, which is more than just a catchy set of words for the trick of it. Blue could be the blue light emerging temporarily after twilight to signal the dark. It is the color of the auric field, that which moves between spirit and earthliness. It is a chord that connects to us to history, the history we make within each individual story, that connects us with family, a community, a country, an age, a generation. We are tangled up in blue. Dylan often changed the stanzas as he performed and recorded the song through the years, adding and subtracting. I appreciate that kind of form, as the stories are always changing. We change the way we tell them. We experience them differently as we move through time and history. The way I speak or spoke about Dylan or any artist of his age is different now than it was when I was 16 years old and my ears were young. Of his song, Dylan responded, "There's a code in the lyrics, and there's no sense of time. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow, all in the same room, and there's very little you can't imagine not happening." End of quote. In other words, these tangled up in blue lyrics make a kind of equation of memory, and memory does not stand still. It is constantly moving within us, through us, without us, so that perhaps we are ultimately creations of time. Perhaps memory has created us. Perhaps it shifts time by an ache of loneliness or a sigh of awe at unbelievable beauty found at closing time in a bar at the edge of nowhere, or in the click of a key in the ignition to say goodbye to goodbye when we've just made love to a miracle. In one memory, I am at Indian school in a navy peacoat, my long dark hair hiding my face. I have a pen in my hand copying Blowing in the Wind, longhand on one of those spiral-bound tablets of green-lined paper. I copy the times they are changing, sing it to myself under the tall cottonwoods on the Indian school campus. It will be years before I find my voice. I will find it in the soundscape of my generation. We listened to the changing times on the radio, carried transistor radios, and listened under the blankets at night to the voices of history and to the singers of love and heartbreak. We played music, danced under light shows, stars, to living music whose resonant sound patterns still cling to the trees, to memory, as we tangled up in blue. We were bent by history, defined by it, even destroyed by it, but like others of my generation, beset by violence and tragedy, we were inspired by Dylan and other singers and players who lifted our spirits, who inspired us to pay attention and keep going through the story that we are making, every one of us. Dylan reminded us in his poem songs that every one of us has a story. Tangled Up in Blue could essentially be a holographic poem song, each verse a fractal of an immense story, a mirror, a memory we left behind in a diner booth. The sky is blue as I listen to Tangled Up in Blue in downtown Tulsa, next door to the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame. I turn up the music. My girlhood is just miles up the road. Blood tales run through our bones like these streets made of the unspeakable. In this moment of history, we are witness to unprecedented and illegal moves to destroy democracy, to erase equality, and undermine human rights based on false premises of sexism, racism, culturalism for greed. In these tangled times, we need the words of the poets, the singers, the prophets, to move in the direction of vision and truth, away from repression and repressive acts that undermine the collective human spirit, to move away from the false stories that support the destruction of Earth, the undermining of female power, which is, in a healthy society, stands hand in hand with male power. Now, the radio I am listening to is digital. I miss the crackle of signal, the scratch of needle on vinyl, but the need for what we find in the music is the same. I bring my restless spirit, disturbed by the blood on the tracks of history, to the altar of music. Love threads through every sung vowel of becoming.